join in, then do.
Yeah.
So yeah, wonderful to see you all here again, and we've got quite a special session lined up today. Normally, obviously, we have sort of maybe one, maybe two people giving a bit of a knowledge share and exchange, but today we have a plethora of sort of perspectives and experts within various different fields joining us from Denmark, from Kenya, from the Netherlands, and then headed up by Hamish, who everyone knows. Today we're going to be looking at very much around the sort of opportunities and challenges of stimulating shape commercialization ecosystems. So obviously we know the challenges that we face here within the UK, but are they echoed elsewhere as well? Are there different permutations, different nuances within that space as well? And how can we connect a little bit more and exchange around that moving forward? So hopefully this will be a fulfilling discussion. Hamish is leading it. So Hamish, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce everyone and get going.
Thanks very much, Sean. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. I know many of you just sort of scanning the list of names of attendees, but for anyone I don't, I'm Hamish McAlpine. I am the Director of Policy and Engagement at Auxentia, who help LSE with the programme management of the Aspect network, and I work closely with Sophie and Sean on that. And it's a real privilege to chair the discussion this morning. We've got three fantastic speakers. I personally get so much out of hearing about international perspectives on these topics. Shape commercialization is obviously of great interest to me, but we're sort of very global in the nature of what we do, and it's just a fantastic privilege to see what other people are doing in different parts of the world, and seeing what lessons we can learn in the UK from that. So to that end, I'm really pleased that we're joined by three people from Europe and Kenya. So we have Rune, who is the head of research-based entrepreneurship and tech transfer in Denmark. Dan, who is the coordinator for knowledge and impact in the social sciences and humanities at the Dutch Research Council in the Netherlands. And David, who is the Dean of the School of Tourism and Hospitality. He's Regional Chair for the Innovation for African Universities Community of Practice from Strathmore University in Kenya. So thank you and welcome to our panelists. What I'd like to do is, as Sean said, have a bit of a discussion about what's happening in your respective ecosystems, the challenges we face, the government support or lack thereof that you see. And also my particular interest, one of the things I've long been involved with is how do we sort of measure and communicate the success of all this? So hopefully we'll touch on all of those things. For people listening, if you have any questions, we should have some Q&A time at the end, but it would also be great if something occurs to you during the discussion. Please pop a question or a comment in the chat and we'll get to as many of those as we can at the end. So what I'd like to do is just ask the panelists to introduce themselves and say a few words about how they've ended up in this position and this world of shape commercialization and maybe what's their involvement been in that. So Rune, should we kick off with you?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Rune Vestergaard from Roskilde University, heading entrepreneurship and also tech transfer from there. Going into the question here is, yes, I ended up here with a cup of coffee 4 years ago with a colleague from another university, and we sat down and discussed that this was a problem. And from there on, we formed like a small group of other likewise people from the other universities who wanted to discuss this, and we just held like quarterly meetings from there, from the beginning, and then we headed up, and now we are like a larger network of 20 people working on from all the universities, the 8 universities, and then like also the technical universities, and working on different areas, and so I could come into that later on.
Fantastic. And what was that, if I may, what was that trigger? What started the conversation? What was that? How did that feeling that we need to do something in this space come about?
the trigger was that we were coming from universities who both have STEM and humanities and social science, and we thought that the problem was that the cases were more difficult to handle. We couldn't handle it the same way and so on, and we also had also the discussion about what is impact and so on came along the discussion, but especially the cases that they were so difficult to handle for us compared to the other to STEM cases as it is. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure many people on the call can sympathise with the difficulty of evidencing the impact from the work in some of these disciplines.
Yeah.
David, does that chime in with your perspective? How have you arrived at this position, and what's your community of practice been up to?
Yeah, right. Thank you very much, Hamish. As you said, David Shaw is my name. Work at Strathmore University as a Dean, School of Tourism Hospitality, but also chair the Community of Practice, the Innovation for African Universities across Africa. Likely, as much as I spend my time in administrative support at the university, I spend most of my life as a researcher. I'm an ecologist by training, so I basically drive research on conservation science and the community policy nexus in conservation enterprise development. How did I find myself here? Of course, as a researcher, I mean, the depth of research is in commercialization. And I think in Africa today, looking at the African landscape, there are lots of things that will actually push every researcher to commercialize. I mean, it's about knowledge economy today, and knowledge has to pay back. And you've seen lots of talks. I work for students for a number of years now. This is my 7th year being a dean. And I know exactly what bothers students. I know exactly how the ecosystem looks like, from employability to knowledge, innovation, what students want actually with their lives. So looking at that from a curriculum perspective, looking at that from my research work perspective, one of the gaps that has not been much done by researchers in Africa is to commercialize knowledge products. And I think that's where we are moving into now. Every university today is talking about commercialization policy. So how I find myself here, first, by relevance of being a researcher, very thin resources globally now, and we have to now find a way of bringing value of the knowledge products that we have. We have students building their innovations, and then we have to have a framework where their products can be commercialized. We have a number of innovators. Universities are actually the next ecosystems for innovation here in Africa. And we don't have a choice, that we have to really create a framework where these knowledge products have to be commercialized. I think that's why I spend most of my life now within the community of practice to harness and bring that ecosystem strong, that knowledge products can now see the light of the day of enterprises and commercial. Yeah, that's it, Amish.
Fantastic, thanks. Dan, over to you. You're muted.
Rookie mistake, thank you. So thank you very much. My name is Daan Olthoff. I work at NWO, that's the Dutch Research Council, or NWO. And that's an autonomous administrative authority which funds scientific research that has scientific as well as societal impact. I've worked here since just before COVID, but pretty recently, since last year, I've been working as a coordinator of impact for the social sciences and humanities domain, which is a quite new and relatively undefined role that I've been shaping myself. But came into existence because at the social science and humanities domain, we wanted to monitor opportunities for social sciences and humanities to increase their impact, as well within the organization, as well as nationally and internationally. What brings me to this topic is that from my perspective, federalization has been receiving currently more and more attention, specifically the importance of shape in innovation. Recently, or well, 2 years ago, a pretty important report came out that stressed the importance of branching out our current definition of innovation to break the traditional mold of saying that it only applies to technological or material innovation, and also to include, for example, regulations and services. But it's also a part of within the organization, because NWO has dedicated research programs aimed at valorization, specifically for startups. And within my domain, we're increasingly looking and trying to figure out really where that leaves us and how we fit in that, and what an integrated system of valorization programs that would actually be, recognizable to shape researchers actually would look like. So very curious to and looking forward to hearing from different perspectives at this roundtable.
Great. So I suppose NWO are a bit like a Dutch UKRI.
Yes.
In terms of being a funder like that.
Yep.
Great.
Yes,
Thanks everyone.
That would be comparable. Yep.
Yeah. So just picking up on that, then one of the things that's been tremendously helpful in the UK's journey over the last sort of 7 years or so has been a sort of shift of an increasing emphasis on research impact and commercialization as a means to achieve that impact. And in the UK, we've benefited through things like the original UKRI Connecting Capability Fund funding that funded the Aspects Network for the first 5 years of its life. I'm really curious that, there seems to be this general recognition from all of you that increasing impact, maybe solving societal problems, is an important driver. And when it comes to commercialization, particularly of SHAPE, what's the policy landscape? What's the funding landscape like in your countries? Dan, perhaps we could stick with you from a funder perspective, and then I'll come to the others.
I think the general landscape, what it looks like, is that the parties that are involved are, of course, ministries and NWO itself, also the Netherlands Enterprise Agency and regional development agencies and KTOs, among others. But in terms of commercialization, startups are generally funded by the government through NWO and the Netherlands Enterprise Agencies, and sometimes also through regional bodies such as provinces and municipalities.
Okay, great. So would you say it's a well-developed area, or is there still, I mean, you sounded like, you weren't exactly sure what your role was. This sounds a bit like still an emerging area.
Is it a well-developed area? Well, it may be a difficult word to use here. I think there are there's room for improvement on a lot of fronts, not just from a SHAPE perspective, but also in general. I think so. I mentioned a couple of parties just now, and one of the things I think that we see in this system is that it's very fragmented and insufficiently standardized, which is a problem because it prevents startups from growing. And you see that fragmentation not just between organizations, so that it's difficult to that's a high threshold to get funding and continue and then grow from one stage to the next, but even within organizations. So I mentioned that NWO has, all of our research programs have impact in it in some way, but so we have a dedicated funding line aimed at commercialization. And what you even see between all the instruments that we have in that funding line is that there's different goals or different criteria, or it's not always really aimed very well at SSH researchers. For example, the emphasis could lie very much on the development of patents, for example, or scaling up, or the language itself can already be focused very much on on making a profit. And as I say to my colleagues here, like no matter what's in the program already, if that's what we're opening with communication-wise, then already you've lost 95% of that field, from my experience.
Still that STEM-centric thinking when it comes to the design of the funding instruments or the communication. Mm-hmm.
Yes, definitely.
David, what's the view in Kenya when it comes to policy and support for this area?
I would consider it progressive. I consider it growing. I know from the African landscape, if you look at Kenya specifically, there's still a lot of energy around STEM, and I think that's really something that everyone needs to be aware of. But I think there's a coming realization of a multidisciplinary approach where there's that social science coming in very strongly in most of the research activities going on. I mean, coming to the realization that any innovation that we have must really get to touch on people. So the social component is actually becoming very strong now for every innovative product. But there are few institutions developing policies around commercialization now. I see that a number of universities are coming up with that. The Kenya government is really getting so much interested in this. I mean, the realization is about employability of young people. I mean, Kenya, the young population, there's a very growing, large number of unemployment, but amidst also challenges for humanity as well. So the Kenyan government is putting some money now. I know there's a lot of interest in trying to support startups that are really addressing solutions to people and, of course, industries, the people looking kind of products. I know of a case whereby there are now interest in innovation hubs. A number of hubs are actually coming up in Nairobi. Some are quite strong and are mobilizing quite huge funds to support businesses in terms of seed funding. But I see also the cross networks across Africa where institutions are partnering together. They're working together to create ecosystems, micro ecosystems, as we would say, where students can work together to develop innovations that can go to the market. So I would say it's pretty progressive, but it's so forward-looking because even institutions are changing curriculum in certain ways to really match the same. So I would say the ecosystem is really ripe from a Kenyan perspective to really develop tangible policies, which are still largely lacking in most areas on commercialization.
And do you think during that sort of development of those policies and processes that SHAPE and STEM disciplines will have sort of parity of esteem, or do you think there's still a job to be done in convincing policymakers and universities of the value of social sciences commercialization?
I don't think there's much convincing to be done. I think this is already clear. I think we just need strong researchers to come up and really create really hubs or research teams that can actually bring really strong cases around social science research. But the most important thing is that today, if you look at the landscape, there's no one fit. It's not about social sciences. It's not about STEM, but it's about an integrated approach. Most popular research or products today really look at the full frame of integrating both sides.
Interesting. As much as I hate the word post-disciplinary, sometimes I feel like that's the direction we're moving in. Rune, what's your perspective from Denmark?
Yeah, we're also working with this hybrid cases term, trying to say, okay, we have both a STEM and SHAPE related areas within the case. But yes, so our funding landscape is a mixture of public and private funds, and they are really when we are focusing on taking research into innovation and then commercialization, then the focus is really much still on the STEM or the way you evaluate it, looking at it like an IP from an IP perspective, or looking at a classic venture case and so on is still a problem. But we also have the problem on the other side. That's the quality of the cases that we as universities bring to the table. Is we have to look at that, and that is actually what all the universities are doing right now is trying to team up on the business development side and saying, okay, we need business developers who has only focus on SHAPE, related cases, and that is the only focus that you as a business developer has. And that, I think, is something that we actually, it was like all universities decided to do that in once. So everybody is right now in this year hiring in new business developers to look at this area, and that's that I think will enhance the quality of the cases as well. I think, because having people who are focused on working on this, not having to divide their focus on both STEM and shape cases all the time, I think that can enhance the quality of the case that we come up with, because that's also what we are getting feedback from Mr. Fund, saying, okay, but you need to also to have quality here, and that's something that we're working on. That's also a culture thing from the researcher. And there's a lot of barriers from the universities as well of doing commercialization as such. So, yeah.
Thank you. That actually leads very nicely on to what I wanted to move on to, which is thinking about culture and incentives for academic researchers to be involved with this. One of the learnings from the Aspect Network is academic researchers in shape disciplines may have different motivations, different language may appeal, different ways of communicating and incentivizing people may be needed. And I'm interested in the panel's experience on that. So, Rune, perhaps sticking with you as you started on that topic.
Yeah, we did a research report. We did a research report last year. We got funded to have a group of researchers look at the topic, and they also looked at barriers and cultures and incentives and so on, and said that this is a barrier that we need to look at. I think also there's cultural barriers, but there's also like we're also looking at the merit system here, because you're not getting merits for doing innovation in Denmark as it is right now. Some universities are playing with strategies where they look at merits where you can get merits for doing some sort of commercialization or other things, collaborations with companies and so on in your research, but it's not embedded in the culture as much as it should be. Or it's not something that if you're leading for a professor position, it's not something that you're going to be measured on. So if you want to enhance in the academic world right now, commercialization is not the way you have to go. But that's changing now, because the political system wants this to be changed. So we know it's going to be changing, but it's still going to be a cultural thing for the researchers, because they need to learn this. It's going to be buttoned up, I think.
And culture change is never an overnight process, I guess.
No.
Dan, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I think what Rune just said applies for the Netherlands as well. It has to do with the system of acknowledgements and rewards. So not just when we're talking about startups, but in general, with every research program and every call for proposals that we write, impact plays a role. But in the end, it really comes down to that a lot of research departments have a continuing emphasis on publications and on publishing. So that just does not leave a lot of room always to go another way, whether that's commercial exploitation or another way at science communication, for example. So that I think that very much applies to the Dutch case as well. At the same time, we do know that that there are occasionally within universities small funds available to open very, very small grants of a couple of €1,000, and those are overwhelmingly popular. I mean, if there's sufficient money to award 5 projects funding of a couple of €1,000, then there might be over 100 applications. So possibly the willingness is there, and I think one of the possible strengths and opportunities for SHAPE is that getting started is relatively easy. A lot less capital is invested when you don't use a lab. But it's definitely a cultural and also a structural barrier that's there.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I think it's probably similar in the UK. You have sort of very simple kind of characterization, moves to change it, but when push comes to shove, and bearing in mind it's a global market for academic researchers often, then the pressure for publications and high quality teaching probably does still trump that in many cases. David, what's your perspective from Kenya and indeed any insights from Africa on particularly sort of researcher culture and incentives when it comes to commercialization?
I think it's good for researchers who really have pushed their work to these limits now. I think from even the little perspective of reward you look at from promotions at university level, or looking at in terms of accolades within the industry framework, there's quite reward, I would say now. If you compare the colleagues in the STEM and the SHIP, the colleagues in the STEM had really got it all quite some times back. And I think now with the shift of curriculum interest around entrepreneurship, and then it is now the time for the SHIP people to really take it all. And they're really doing great. From publications, of course, Kenyan and African universities still put a lot of weight on publications for promotions. A number of colleagues who are in the social sciences dragged their promotions because probably they were not able to push quite a number of these projects. But those who are now moving into innovation and commercialization are actually moving nearly at par with the counterparts in the STEM. So I would say it's the space, the reward. It may not be to really the extent that they expect, but I think the system is really ripe now for those who are in the SHIP research to really probably get the reward at individual level, to get the reward in terms of IP credits now for the kind of products they have, and in terms of even recognition and promotions at university level. So it's really good time for them. And even the curriculum change now focus more on entrepreneurship. So they're really thriving now.
Sounds good. And I guess with you being at the stage where you're still putting policies in place, there's the opportunity to build in that kind of shape awareness or recognition of shape subjects having the same kind of potential for commercialization as STEM.
The policy is actually cross-cutting, I would say. Yeah, but I think the bit of recognizing all frames of research in the university, because largely universities cut across from STEM to social sciences. So there's no specific for a particular line. But I think the kind of policies that are being developed now are carrying more of both sides of projects. But lots of interest around commercialization, lots of interest around entrepreneurship. So you realize at this point of time, then the SHIP research is finding a lot of room to really come to the table quite a lot.
Yeah, that's great. Whereas I think the UK's journey has maybe been more one of having a relatively well-established STEM-centric sort of commercialization ecosystem and having to think about how that's adapted to the social sciences, the humanities and the arts. I want to return now to the ecosystem. So I think, Dan, you said you see it as quite fragmented and there's potential gaps. Where's the biggest gap at the moment? What would be the sort of single thing that would really help the ecosystem? Where does that sit?
Possibly the biggest gap is that there isn't really one unified ecosystem. As far as I know, there's not really, for example, just one unifying platform where you could go to see, okay, I am a researcher, I want to explore certain possibilities. Where can I look? I mean, where do you even start? I mean, suppose you are a researcher, you can contact your university and ask them for a bit. But I mean, there's some money in the national government through various agencies. There's some money then at the local level. But, where do you even start? I think that's one of the biggest gaps. Another is that even if you then have an overview of what exists, is that every every fund, and I mean, you have of course private funds and foundations as well, is totally different amongst themselves. So of course, a startup is a precarious thing. That of course that cannot. It's not a process of okay, I can take years for this. It's very precarious, and if if all those funding instruments and the process of moving from one fund to the other is slow and difficult to understand and just not clear at all, then it's very worrisome that you're dependent on those funds.
And so you're talking there about potential sources of funding. Does that extend to other forms of support like accelerators or incubators?
Yes, I mean we have those as well, but I mean it's part of the same ecosystem and the same issue.
Yeah, Rune, is that something you recognize too?
Well, I think the ecosystem here in Denmark for startups is there, and also startups that are within the Shape areas is there, but you need to have a company. You need to have maybe start selling the first product and so on. Then the ecosystem is there, but if you're still like having a research idea, a research result, and want to form this into an idea and innovation, and form that, then we still have the problem. And what we are in our network, our national network, is working on saying, okay, what can we do on a national level to support these cases and identify them and work with them, and what should be done on a local level, just one-to-one with a business developer at the university and so on. And that's actually what we're looking into now, and trying to form and doing different projects where we say, okay, if we do this, then we can, on a national level, then the researcher can go back to like the local and get more support there, and then form the idea further on and so on. So I think still before company registration, it's still a problem, and there's still a gap there where we need to work on, both on the funding side but also on the support side, I think.
Yeah, just that continuity through the whole journey.
Precisely.
Yeah. David, what's your perspective from Kenya? I mean, we did a bit of work in South Africa last year, and as part of that, we looked at the African innovation ecosystem, and Nairobi stands out as a really, really hot place in terms of venture capital and entrepreneurial activity. But is it fragmented as Dan and Rune have described, or not?
No, I totally agree with Dan and Rune on the same. As much as there's a lot of talk, lots of interest in this, there's need to harness this kind of energy in different units. I know certain hubs are really trying to do this. They're independent hubs in Nairobi, just trying to put all these energies together. We have also independent hubs, smaller hubs in universities, trying to create that micro ecosystem within the university setup. But the gaps are still real, like the funding gaps are still real. I mean, if you look at how the funding ecosystem has been, the culture of funding over time, there's been a lot of over-glorifying science domain funding than there's social and humanities. I think if I just give a light joke, sometimes in the universities, people think people in the science are having more potential of attracting money than people in social sciences. But as you look at that, then you realize our curriculum in our higher learning institutions in Africa is also a problem. Because the innovation process, most innovators come with this very early. And if they don't get it during their training, their formation period, then they likely don't have it at the end of it, or they take too long in the formation process. So how we rework our curriculum, which a number of universities are trying to work on. If you look at the Innovation for African Universities Community of Practice and what we're trying to do, it starts from curriculum. So that's really one point of gap. Then it starts from a culture that has been there over time in terms of what do you fund in Africa. mean, somebody would believe it's about science to fund in Africa, but I think there's also realization that African solutions have to also focus on the social domains. So policy perspective is also a problem, and the industry participation. I think a number of industries are now coming in to put in money in different projects, which is a good thing. But it takes a bit of time to realize that big funders or industry players are now willing to put money into the innovation hubs and say, hey, David, we are happy that you are going to build people in entrepreneurship. We are willing to put this money with you to build the young people. So I think it is changing, but I think the gap areas are clear in terms of funding landscape, in terms of curriculum, and in terms of industry participation. And also look at it from the government perspective in terms of our education system, the anchoring policy.
Yeah. It's interesting you raise that. Sometimes I see so much positive stuff going on particularly in the UK in this space. But then I remember we inhabit a relative kind of bubble. We're dealing with a subset of what goes on in wider higher education systems, and certainly in the UK there's many universities are facing quite a challenging funding environment themselves. So I think your kind of holistic approach of thinking, how does this fit into the university higher education system as a whole? What are we trying to do with our higher education system in terms of training young people, equipping young people with the skills is fantastic. I want to move on now to measuring success. So there's been quite a lot of debate over recent years of, should you try and look at the kind of shape ventures that are emerging and measure them by the same kind of metrics and ideas that you would any venture? So is it about return on investment? Is it about shareholder value? There's obviously some social sort of value, health and environmental value as well. Should we be looking to use the same kind of measures of success for any venture, for Shape Ventures, or should we be trying to develop new ones? How should we measure success, basically? Does anyone have a particular view on that?
Well, I could start. I'm not sure if I have a particular view on that. I think to emphasize that in the Netherlands, I feel that we are still way too much at the start of this question. Because to me, it sounds not very logical to have a one-size-fits-all system. I think there are different challenges and different opportunities for Shape Ventures in comparison to STEM. In a world where Shape and STEM are always that neatly distinct from each other, and that are, I thought, very well outlined in the Danish report that Rune mentioned. But one of the challenges that we also have in the Netherlands is that we've had the report from Advisory Council from Science, Technology and Innovation stating that we need to have a much broader view of innovation and that we need to have the underlying systems to support that. So now currently there's a project ongoing aimed at stimulating integrated innovation that is precisely tackling this question, like how do we measure that? So of course we have technology readiness levels and societal readiness levels, but do we need to have both of them in projects? How do they compare against each other? If we're just talking about startups, how do we need to measure that? Because obviously they don't have the same goals or the same systems, but how do we need to measure that? I'm actually curious to hear more from the other speakers, because I think this is a part that we have much to learn from, coming from a Dutch perspective.
Rune or David, any?
Yeah, I can say a bit about it. I think we've been actually one of the activities that we set up this year was to say, okay, can we do a national database of both cases that we've been running, but also like past cases and so on. And the problem is, I think, related to measuring what is success, or what is the area that what are this solving and so on. And it becomes so every time we try to say, okay, this is social impact, and then we find cases that are not solving social impact, and then we just sit there and look at the case and say, what do we do with these type of cases, and so on. So that's that. I think it's a problem, and the problem is that normally we just in STEM cases we look at growth and employment when we have national funding, and that's like the key things to look at. Not so of course it has to solve something, but that is like in the where we much more in the shape area says, okay, what is it solving, and so on, and that maybe that's. I don't know if we're looking at the right indicators. Yeah, a question here.
Yeah, for us.
There's definitely this sort of presumption, and it's true in many cases that when you're talking about shaped ventures, it's about social impact. But of course, that doesn't have to be true. Neither are STEM ventures exclusively about economic impact or growth. So yeah, I guess it's a tricky one to navigate. And then, as you say, you come up with a framework and you find a venture that doesn't fit into that framework. So
yeah, and should it solve societal challenges? Is that a measurement, societal challenges? But what is the societal challenges then? And whose societal challenges is the most important? And normally we can see it on the funding scheme because then climate technologies and so on are getting funded, but we can't see it in the shape area. It's just shape. Yeah.
Well, I think maybe from my side, when you look at the shape ventures, there's a reason why we are developing these ventures. There's a frame of it. There's an interest in it. There's a goal for it, and there's an impact that is of interest. And how would I measure impact of a shape venture? Of course, in every venture, if you look at it from a sustainability perspective, the economics would be important. The economic impact, I would still lean on that as well. There's need to test exactly, because ventures have to run. They have to be economically sustainable. They have to be economically viable, whether it's a STEM or a shape, that should be cutting across. Mm-hmm. But then the strength of a shape venture is not only the economic delivery. It's not the wheel is running if it's a science innovation. But I think one of the strengths a shape venture has to bring on the table is the social enterprise aspect. It is a social influence, is a social impact. Of course, there are lots of social issues that we have in society, but can they deliver solutions to them? I think for any shape venture, then I'll be very glad as a researcher to look at which social frame is it trying to address? Which solution is it trying to address? Which issue within a social frame is it trying to really capture and bring or smoothen out? Then, of course, the economists will come with the economic metrics and then want to know exactly what's the economic value or what kind of return is it bringing. So I still believe that those particular matrices on economics or the economy, the value it brings, that will be important. But also from a shape perspective, which sometimes the STEM ventures lack, is that social impact.
Mm. We often see in some of the programs we run quite a lot of reliance on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Do you think they're a reasonable framework for sort of characterizing different types of social impact? Have you seen much use of those?
I do know this, and I sometimes get my hands into the ESG frame, where we are leaning more on the Sustainable Development Goals. There's a lot, and there's a lot of borrowing that shape ventures can get from SDG measurement perspective, a number of them. I think they were so well thought that maybe any shape venture don't have to rethink anything else. Mm. There are lots of social frames that we can think about. If you talk about hunger, there's a lot of frame on that. If you talk about quality education, it's a big frame on that. If you talk about equitable society and all those jobs and the meaning of work and all these things, I think if anybody rested on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, you can actually single out areas where the measurement of the shape ventures will fall.
Mm. Rune, Dan, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's still they cover like all areas, these UN goals. So of course, yes, you can always use them as a measurement and say, hey, we're solving that at some point, I think. But then again, it's not. It's just us saying that we're solving that, and we still need the measurement there and saying, okay, what impact are we really doing? Are we doing impact on food security? Is it a really impact that we're doing, or is it just us saying that we want to do impact on food security? So I think it's they are there, and we also use them for researchers to say, okay, your research is in this development goals and so on. But again, it's not measuring. Or it's for me, I cannot see the measuring part of it. It's too overall to look at the goals like that.
Yeah, I agree, and I was thinking, besides the SDGs, from a national funder's perspective, there are also various national frameworks, knowledge and innovation agendas, and all that's the kind of stuff that Research Funder already works with, which could be the basis for a thematic research program aimed at startups. But the problem with that could be that there already in those agendas there could be inherent biases that maybe do not allow for each type of research and each type of scientific discipline to really come into their own if they have to fit within that mold.
Yeah, that kind of top-down narrative, it's been formed by someone with something in mind, and has it really been designed to capture impact in a kind of bottom-up useful way? Indeed, I mean, I'd agree. We see so many pitch decks, for example, that have some kind of allusion to alignment with an SDG, but when you dig underneath that, there's not a lot there. So yeah, good point. I'd like to leave room for questions at the end. So one last question from me to you all. This is magic wand time. Well, this is a pencil, but imagine this is a magic wand, which each of you now have. What one action or thing would you take to improve commercialization of ventures from social sciences, arts and humanities within your ecosystem?
If I could start, just in a utopian situation, I think more money is always welcome, but specifically money for just really small grants to start out with, to that would make valorization and commercial exploitation to lower the threshold, specifically for shape researchers that might be averse to that idea in the first instance, and to have a national program, for example, or maybe even have it just at a university level where it's more where again the threshold is low for researchers and plenty of them to be able to just with a few $1,000s, euros, be able to start up something, and even when the ambitions might not be to get towards a larger scale up or to make very big impact on a national or an international level, but just even at a very small and local regional level, I think that will be great if something like that would exist.
So just lowering the barriers for those researchers that are interested just to take the next step and to build a bit of momentum, maybe, and maybe that also speaks to culture change.
Yes, definitely, and that would, I think David said the research needs to happen, and I think we have them, could be more, but we also have to make them visible. So if we have more, then there needs to be a top-down effort then to put those in the spotlight and inspire others, not just within Shape, but also outside of it.
Nice, thank you. Rune, David, what's your one wish?
I think the merit system is for doing cultural changes. Yeah, I think that's really what we need to have, not just emphasizing collaboration, but actually doing real impact or innovation could be a really good way. I think we have researchers who is really good at collaborating with external either companies or municipalities and so on. But the problem is getting it from that research into innovation, and they have to be like what you call them, igniters of this. We don't need them to go out of university. We just need them to ignite this, and we need them to spark this and get people excited about this. And that's something that I think we should focus into the merit system to get that cultural change, so they can see that they are actually the ones who are responsible for getting their research out more than just publications and books and conferences and so on.
You're really speaking to that culture change piece.
Yes, I think that's what's hindering us most here in Denmark at the moment, because I think we have a movement on doing business development. The universities also on a management level want this to happen. We also have the politicians with us and so on. So we actually need that movement from the researchers as well. But I also think it's because they're not getting paid for the effort. So
and we've seen in the UK, so the Aspect Research Commercialization Accelerator, the ARC Accelerator program, which is jointly funded between the Economic and Social Research Council and the Arts and Humanities Research Council. It speaks to both of your points. It's the power of, so it provides some free training, so it lowers the barrier to people exploring this and figuring out. It doesn't mean you have to become a CEO of a widget factory to do commercialization. And it also speaks through the academic buyout that program has provided, of lowering that barrier to taking the first step, because you've got some relatively modest grants just to lower the barriers to taking that next step. So we've seen the power of that in the UK, certainly firsthand. David, final cast of the wand.
No, it's fine, Amish. I would really be glad to commercialize my products. I'm sending one out to the market, just giving a trial. I mean, it's not enough being a researcher. I know we publish papers, it's okay, but I think it makes sense now to bring back home what's the commercial value of the work. That's really one thing. But Hamish, majorly, my big wish, which I'm trying now, hopefully it goes through, changing curriculum. I'm actually working on a one-stop shop place where I would get industry put in resources, see value to contribute into innovation process. I'm changing curriculum and creating space where I have mentors working with young people. I'm changing curriculum where I get money on a venture that's going to be money available on seed funding to the young people trying their businesses. If they make the mistake, it is okay. I think for me, that's a big wish now in Africa. And if there's any African scholar or any African academic, we just want to create a space where we can change the training model, but also create a space where the industry can see value to bring in resources where we can co-train together. I think that's really what that's where the space where we are going to do all this end-to-end up to commercialization.
Yeah, again, speaking to that kind of culture and mindset change, I guess. I'll open up to the floor now for the last 5 minutes of this session. We had a question in the chat from Chris Buckingham. Sorry, David, you mentioned a framework you use with your academics in SHAPE. Can you say a few words about that? This was fairly early on in the conversation. Are you using a framework?
Was this in terms of measurement of impact?
If Chris is there and he'd like to elaborate.
Yeah. Sorry. Hi, David. You mentioned it right at the beginning. It sounded like you had a framework that you use with your academics to sort of, I suppose, scope what they're doing, maybe?
The framework, I see the question is, you mentioned a framework on use of your academics in SHAPE. Would you be able to tell a group more about this? I would really want to know exactly which framework, because I've mentioned quite a number of things. If it's about measurement, then I can actually be able to explain a bit on the same.
That's fine. Yeah, I was thinking more about the sort of process of getting them to think more about their approaches in terms of spinning out or licensing, how they're going to commercialize what they've got. But if it's impact, I'm sure that would be a value to the group, huh?
Yeah, I think, Chris, what's happening here is that we are trying to harness energies from all sources. And from the entrepreneurship perspective, we are creating space for researchers within entrepreneurship to bring out all these products that can be commercialized. So we are setting up a policy on commercialization framework. We are doing that so that every researcher can see value of what they create. I think is the next big thing the university is doing now. For all researchers across the university, so that researchers don't keep their work, but push their knowledge level to their products that can actually be commercialized. There is an IP unit that is supporting them through developing of the rights, the copyright framework and all that, because that's also where most researchers lose it. We do the work, but somebody else really just finds it great and runs with it. So we are trying to put all this framework from a legal perspective, from a commercialization perspective, so that researchers can really have the space where their work can see the light of the day on the table for commercial value.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Chris, for the question. Any other questions from the floor? Either in the chat or please just unmute yourself. Last chance. Oh, yeah, Sean, go for it.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I had a question, which is just in terms of thinking about today's discussion, because it's just fantastic to hear all of the different views, and there are various different kind of synergies and alignments as well through some of the challenges and things. As far as I'm aware, and do forgive my ignorance if I'm incorrect on this, there's no sort of international symposium or work group or think tank to try and approach some of these, because there seems to be commonalities across each. And so, you know, do you, or does the panel sort of see a potential value or potential interest in developing a sort of, international think tank in a way around how to commercialize shape, how to stimulate ecosystems, and just being able to pull together these experiences and knowledge and see where we can share best practice on that kind of scale?
Yeah, if I could answer, I think definitely. I think many of those challenges are not just confined to one country. They are transnational in definition. And I referred earlier to the report that Rune mentioned from Denmark that was incredibly helpful in the Dutch case as well. And I know a lot of colleagues within my organization and outside of it have read it as well to better understand the position in the Netherlands as well. So yeah, I think that definitely more international collaboration and exchange is useful.
Now, I'd probably to just make some comments, Sean. I think not just think tanks only. You know, the popularity and the visibility STEM got was actually based on different groupings, different platforms, the talks every now and again. And I think probably it's really a right thing to do now, so that the science community from the SHIP side can actually find a platform and a space where there's a lot of big things, lots of lots of conversations, lots of cross knowledge sharing, that this can happen. So I think go beyond the think tank, but can we have platforms where we can already have lots of conversations, meetings, conferences happening around the SHIP, this SHIP area?
Thanks, Sean and David. I know we're at time now, and I know everyone likely has busy days ahead. So we'll draw this to a close now. That's a great note to end on, maybe moving from think tanks to doing tanks. Two takeaways from me on this. We are all early in this. You know, I think we talk about the UK have been doing this for a number of years, but the challenges that everyone's discussed and the things like the fragmented ecosystem is still a very familiar tale here in the UK, at least from my perspective. Second thing, I think it definitely seems there's more in common than that which divides us. We need more funding. We need to carry on the work with culture change, which is a necessarily slow process. People talk about fragmented ecosystems. This is a common story, and I think we can all relate to some of the things you've talked about. So I'd like to thank the panel again, Rune, Dan and David. Thank you very much for your contributions. And everyone, thank you for joining the call. I hope you found it as interesting and stimulating as I did. And we'll see you for the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.